The high-pitched whine of the orbital buffer was the only sound on the sun-drenched street. A single drop of sweat traced a line through the grime on Mark's temple, falling to the driveway. He paused, wrist aching, and looked at the reflection in the midnight blue metal. Not his own, but his sister's. A shadow fell over the car, long, sharp. Article 7, Section 4. The voice was like shattered glass. He turned. A woman, thin-lipped and holding a clipboard, was staring at the puddle of soapy runoff trickling toward the gutter. "Excuse me." "You are in violation," she said, her eyes not meeting his. "This is a public pool violation." Mark looked at the buffer in his hand. He looked at the half-waxed sedan. He looked at the few gallons of harmless water on his own concrete. This is a car, Mrs. Vance. It's not a pool." She finally looked at him, her gaze as cold and flat as a winter sky. "The bylaws are clear. Unauthorized water accumulation. You have 24 hours to cure." She snapped a picture with her phone. The flash was blinding. The buffer felt impossibly heavy. Mark clicked it off, the sudden silence of the suburban Saturday pressing in. The scent of cherry wax and his sister's lingering air freshener, that cheap pine tree she'd always loved, clogged his throat. He'd been avoiding this. Cleaning her car was the last chore, the last time he'd have a reason to be in it, to touch what was hers. 3 months since the funeral, and the house still felt like a museum he was trespassing in. "Eleanor, wait," he called out, his voice hoarse. He wiped his hands on his jeans, leaving a soapy streak. "What are you talking about? Cure what? It's car wash runoff. It'll be dry in an hour." Eleanor Vance, president of the prestigious Oakwood Creek Homeowners Association, did not stop walking. She merely slowed, turning her head just enough to regard him over the top of her angular sunglasses. She was a woman built of rigid lines, from her severe gray bob to her knife-pleated khaki skirt. "Mr. Holden, you've been in possession of this property for 94 days. You received the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, I presume, at closing." "My sister's lawyer gave me a binder, yes. I haven't exactly had time to." "Ignorance is not a defense," she snapped. Article 7, Section 4. The creation, maintenance, or allowance of any unauthorized body of water, permanent or temporary, which may constitute a public nuisance, attractant, or recreational hazard, is strictly prohibited. This, she gestured with her clipboard to the puddle, is an unauthorized recreational hazard. Mark stared at her. He felt a hysterical laugh bubble in his chest. "A recreational hazard? For what? Ants? Are ants going to water ski in it? It's 2 inches deep, Eleanor. It's soap." "It is runoff. It is uncontained. It is flowing toward the public storm drain, which is HOA property." She made a check mark on her sheet. "You are fined $500 effective immediately. You have 24 hours to cure the violation. If the hazard is present tomorrow at 10:00 a.m., an additional fine of $500 will be levied, and every day thereafter." The laugh died. $500! The blood drained from his face. The funeral had cleaned him out. The small life insurance policy barely covered the mortgage transfer, and he was still 2 weeks from starting his new remote work job. "You can't be serious for washing a car." "I am always serious about the integrity of this community." She started walking again. "But everyone washes their cars," he protested, following her down his own driveway. "They do not. The approved list of mobile detailing services uses water reclamation mats. You," she said, her voice dripping with disdain, "are using a common hose, like an animal." The insult was so bizarre, so detached from reality, that Mark stopped. "You're fining me $500 for using a hose." "I am fining you," she corrected, "for creating an unpermitted public pool." She turned the corner, and just like that, she was gone. Mark stood alone on the driveway, the smell of wax suddenly sickening. He looked at the puddle. The sun was already shrinking its edges. A public pool. He went inside, his hands shaking with a fury he hadn't felt since the hospital. He'd known HOAs were petty. His sister, Sarah, had complained about Eleanor once or twice, calling her the queen of the cul-de-sac. But this was psychosis. He booted up his laptop, went to the HOA payment portal, and there it was. Violation 7.4 Public Nuisance Water Hazard. Fine $500. Status pending. It was real. She had processed it in the 30 seconds it took her to walk home. He felt a wave of profound helplessness. He couldn't afford this. He couldn't afford the fight. He couldn't afford to live here if this was the reality. He slumped, putting his head in his hands. This house was the only thing he had left of Sarah. He promised her he'd stay. He promised her he'd be okay. He opened his email to find the official notice. It was there, a sterile PDF. Dear resident, an inspection of your property, public pool violation, cure immediately, attached were the photos she had taken. Exhibit A, the puddle. Exhibit B, the hose lying coiled on the grass. Unauthorized water distribution equipment. Exhibit C, a wider shot of the car, the house, the driveway. He stared at Exhibit C. It was a standard, wide-angle shot. But in the background, across the street and 2 houses down, just at the edge of the frame, he could see Alina's driveway. She wasn't alone. A man in a crisp, dark blue suit was standing there, shaking her hand. He was holding a leather portfolio. Beside them was a black sedan, far too expensive for this neighborhood. Mark zoomed in. The man was smiling. Alina was not. She was just nodding. Behind them, partially obscured by an oak tree, was a small, temporary sign hammered into her lawn. He could only make out 2 words. CRSTVIW and HOMES. Mark looked at the violation notice. He looked at the fine. He looked at the man in the suit. A cold dread, heavier and darker than grief, settled in his stomach. This wasn't about soap. This wasn't about a puddle. This was about something else entirely. And he had a terrible feeling that the $500 was just the beginning. For a full minute, Mark didn't move. He just zoomed in and out on the grainy image. Crestview Homes, the man, the handshake, the absurdity of the public pool fine snapped into sharp, terrifying focus. This wasn't a penalty, it was a message. It was the first shot fired in a war he didn't even know he was fighting. He spent the next hour in a frantic digital deep dive. Crestview Homes was a high-end property developer. They didn't build tract houses, they built luxury lifestyle enclaves. Their last project, the Summit at Grays Lake, had involved buying out an entire 50-home neighborhood, leveling it, and building million-dollar condos. The news articles were full of glowing PR about urban revitalization, and small, angry quotes from residents who claimed they were harassed and pushed out by zoning changes and escalating taxes. Oakwood Creek wasn't a condo development. It was a quiet, 20-year-old subdivision, but it was in a prime location, backing onto a new tech corridor. He pulled up the county property records. His sister's house, his house. Value $410,000. He checked the neighbors. The house on his left, $415,000. The house on his right, the one connecting to Alina's property line, $420,000. Alina Vance's house, sold. Sold, he clicked the link. Sold 3 weeks ago to a numbered LLC. CHOAKWOODACQISITIONS. He traced the LLC's registration. The corporate address was the same as Crestview Homes. He felt his blood run cold. She didn't even live here anymore. She was a tenant in a house she'd already sold to the developer. He kept digging. He checked the houses on the entire block. One by one, he found the same pattern. Over the last 6 months, 12 of the 20 houses on his street had been sold to that same LLC. The only holdouts were his house, the one on his left, and a few across the street. Alina wasn't just the HOA president. She was the shepherd, thinning the flock for the wolves. The public pool violation wasn't petty tyranny. It was a weapon of economic attrition. She was trying to bleed him out. Sarah. He grabbed the binder from the shelf, the one from the lawyer. He tore through it, looking for her HOA files. He found them in the back, a stack of letters. March 14, violation 11.2, lawn maintenance. Fine, $100. March 22, violation 9.5, non-compliant mailbox. Fine, $250. April 3, violation 11.2, lawn maintenance, uncured. Fine, $500. April 10, violation 7.1, exterior paint discoloration. Fine, $1,000. He looked at the dates. This was when Sarah was in her final rounds of chemo. This was when she was too weak to get the mail, let alone paint the house. Alina had been harassing her, fining her thousands of dollars while she was dying. A white-hot rage eclipsed his grief. He saw a handwritten note from Sarah, the penmanship shaky, stapled to the last fine. Called Alina, offered to pay. She said, "That's not what we're looking for." She asked if I'd considered selling. Said Mr. Harris from Crestview could make it all go away. Refused. He slammed the binder shut. This was why Sarah had been so stressed at the end. It wasn't just the cancer. It was this. Alina Vance had been tormenting his dying sister to force a sale, and now she was starting on him. The phone rang, making him jump. It was an unknown number. Hello? Is this Mark Holden? The voice was hesitant male. Yes, who is this? My name is Ben Miller. I live across the street, the green 2-story. I saw Alina Vance at your driveway earlier. Mark felt his shoulders tense. Yeah, she was. Listen, Ben said, his voice dropping to a whisper. I'm not supposed to be calling my wife. We're trying to move and we can't afford trouble, but I saw her. And I saw what she did to Sarah, and did she fine you? $500 for a public pool violation. Ben let out a choked, bitter laugh. A pool, that's a new one. For us it was unapproved shrubbery, $2,000. What? We planted rose bushes. They were 2 inches over the 36-inch height limit in the bylaws. She fined us every day until we tore them out. We're on the list to sell to Crestview now. We couldn't take it anymore. Ben, Mark said, packing the kitchen. She's working for them. She sold her house. Half the block has. Silence on the other end, then a heavy sigh. We know, but what can we do? She is the HOA. She controls the board. The 2 other board members are guys from Crestview. They held an emergency election 6 months ago. Nobody even knew about it. She has all the power. She can fine us, lien our houses, and foreclose. It's all legal. It can't be, Mark seethed. It is. She's twisting the bylaws, but the bylaws are ironclad. Any violation is at the board's discretion. And she is the board. Look, man, I'm sorry. I just called to say. Be careful. This isn't a fight you can win. She wants your house. It's the key property. It connects the 2 lots Crestview needs for their main entrance. She'll get it. What about the fines Sarah owed? Mark asked, dreading the answer. She'll have transferred them to you. The debt stays with the property. You probably owe $3,000 or $4,000 right now. After the call, Mark checked his HOA portal again. Ben was right. Under outstanding balance, a new number had appeared. Balance, $4,250. They had rolled his sister's debt onto his account. Plus his own $500. He had 30 days to pay or they would begin lien proceedings. He was trapped. He was being extorted. He looked back at the email at the photo of the puddle. Article 7, Section 4, Public Nuisance. Recreational hazard. Wait, recreational. He thought back to what Ben said. A pool, that's a new one. Why that specific bizarre violation? Why not improper drainage or chemical runoff? Why call it a public pool? He grabbed his keys. He didn't know what he was looking for, but he had to move. He walked out the front door and down the street toward the actual community pool. It was at the end of the cul-de-sac, hidden behind a high brick wall. It was supposed to be open from May to September. He got to the gate. It was locked. A heavy chain and padlock were looped through the bars. A laminated sign, warped by the sun, read, "Closed for emergency maintenance, indefinitely." The pool hadn't been open all summer. Mark gripped the cold bars. This was the real public pool, the one their dues were supposed to maintain, and it was derelict. He stared at the sign, emergency maintenance. He thought of the bank transfers Sarah had been fighting. He thought of the $4,250 fine. He looked at the murky, leaf-filled water inside. And then he looked at the name of the maintenance company printed at the bottom of the sign. It wasn't a pool service. It was a holding company. VANCE LLC. Eleanor wasn't just extorting residents. She was defrauding them. She'd created a fake maintenance company, closed the pool, and was paying herself the entire community's maintenance fund. The public pool violation wasn't just a random bylaw. It was a sick, arrogant joke. She was fining him for a fake pool while she was draining the real one. Mark's heart was hammering against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of pure adrenaline. He took a picture of the sign. He took pictures of the chained gate, the slimy green water, the crumbling plaster. This was it. This was the leverage. This was no longer a one-sided harassment campaign. This was felony embezzlement. He ran back to his house, his mind racing faster than his legs. He didn't just have a defense, he had a nuke. But nukes were messy. If he accused her publicly and he was wrong about even one detail, she would use the HOA's lawyers, funded by his own dues, to countersue him into oblivion. He was fighting a legal entity. He couldn't just be angry, he had to be perfect. He called Ben back. "I'm at the pool," Mark said, his voice low and urgent. "What, Mark? That's a bad idea. She's got cameras. She's stealing, Ben, right in front of us. The pool is closed for maintenance by Vance Holdings, LLC. It's her company. She's paying herself our reserve fund." There was a long, heavy silence on the line. Mark could hear Ben's wife murmuring frantically in the background. "Ben, are you there?" "You're sure?" Ben's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm positive." "She's been harassing us to fund her own embezzlement. Sarah knew. She was fighting it. That's why Eleanor came after her so hard. That's why she's coming after me." "Oh my God," Ben breathed. "The special assessment." "What special assessment?" "At the town hall meeting next week. It's mandatory. She's claiming the emergency repairs to the pool pump and filter system are going to cost $200,000. She's levying a one-time $10,000 fee on every household." Mark felt sick. "She's going to steal $200,000 in one shot, on top of what she's already taken." No, Ben said, his voice hardening. She's not. She's covering her tracks. She's going to take the $200,000, then use a fraction of it to actually fix the pool and pocket the difference as a final bonus before Crestview tears the whole place down. It was audacious. It was brilliant. It was pure evil. We have to stop her, Mark said. How she holds all the cards, it's her word against ours. Not just her word, Mark said, his eyes landing on the binder. My sister was meticulous. She kept everything. There are bank statements. She was tracking the HOA's reserve account. She has notes. We have the sign. We have the LLC registration. We have the Crestview sales. It's not just a suspicion, Ben. It's a pattern. Another long pause. He heard Ben's wife. Don't you dare, Ben. We're almost out. Ben ignored her. What do you need? Everyone she's fined, everyone she's pushed out, the Garcias, the Millers, you, me, we need a united front, and we need to go over her head. There's no one over her head, Ben said hopelessly. The board is her. Not the board, the law, the district attorney, the state's real estate commission. This is fraud, Ben, racketeering. We're not residents fighting an HOA. We're victims of a criminal conspiracy. For the next 4 days, Mark's house became a secret war room. Ben, his fear finally eclipsed by his rage, became his lieutenant. They brought in the Garcias, an elderly couple fined into near bankruptcy over the wrong shade of beige on their window shutters. They brought in the Millers, who had already sold but hadn't closed and who were furious at being cheated. They pieced together the timeline. Step 1, Alina and the 2 Crestview plants win the emergency board election. Step 2, Alina begins a quiet campaign of harassment against residents in the target zone for the new development. Step 3, simultaneously she forms Vance Holdings and closes the pool, diverting the $150,000 reserve fund to her own account. Step 4, she uses the HOA's legal counsel to send threatening letters, while Crestview's agent, Mr. Harris, follows up with lowball cash for peace offers. Step 5, with the holdouts like Sarah identified, she escalates the fines, creating massive unpayable debts to force a sale or foreclosure. Step 6, the public pool violation against Mark was the first move in this final aggressive phase. Step 7, the special assessment was her golden parachute, one last massive score before the neighborhood ceased to exist. It's perfect, Maria Garcia said, her hands trembling as she looked at the flowchart they'd drawn on Mark's wall. She uses our own money to hire the lawyers to steal our homes, and she uses the developer's money to… What? What does she get? Mark pulled up the LLC registration for CHOAKWOODACQUSITIONS. When Crestview finalized the purchase of her house, they didn't just pay market value. They paid market value plus a $500,000 consulting fee. She's not just their agent, she's their partner. They had the case, it was airtight. They compiled everything into identical binders, one for the DA, one for the press, and one for the town hall meeting. We can't just send this, Ben said, tapping the binder. She'll get a tip-off from her lawyers, she'll shred everything. The accounts will be emptied and she'll be in Mexico before the DA even opens the file. So what do we do? Mark asked. The town hall, Ben said, a grim smile on his face. She's expecting to walk in there, demand $200,000 and have us all cower. She's arrogant. She'll have all her documents. She'll be ready to defend the assessment, not herself. We confront her, Mark said, the plan forming. Publicly in front of everyone, we hand out the evidence. She'll deny it, said Mrs. Garcia. She'll say it's slander. That's why we don't go first, Mark said. We let her make her pitch. We let her lie. We let her commit to the fraud right there in front of 50 homeowners. We record it, and then we show them where the money really went. We need to be careful, Ben warned. The developer Harris will be there. This is their final victory. They'll be there to watch. Good, Mark said, his jaw tight. Let them watch her burn. The night of the town hall, the community clubhouse was packed. The air was thick with anger and humidity. Mark, Ben, and the Garcias took seats in the back, each with a backpack at their feet, stuffed with copies of the evidence. Mark felt a bead of sweat trickle down his back, just as it had when he was washing the car. It felt like a lifetime ago. Alina Vance walked to the podium. She looked magnificent, exuding corporate power in a sharp navy blue pantsuit. She tapped the microphone. Good evening, residents. Let's get straight to the point. As you know, our community pool has suffered a catastrophic pump failure. She began her presentation. A slideshow filled with terrifying, official-looking invoices and engineering reports, all from Vance Holdings. Mark saw Mr. Harris, the developer, standing in the back corner, arms crossed, a smug smile on his face. Alina continued, her voice filled with false regret. And so the board has been forced to approve a one-time special assessment of $10,000 per household, due in full in 60 days. The room erupted. Shouts of no, and we can't afford this, filled the air. Alina held up her hand for silence. This is non-negotiable. It is a board decision. If you fail to pay, a lien will be placed. A point of order, Madam President? Ben Miller's voice boomed from the back. Aliner squinted. Mr. Miller, you're not recognized. You're not demanding an assessment, Aliner, Ben said, standing up. You're demanding a ransom. Mark stood up beside him. We're not here to discuss the new $200,000 assessment, Mark said, his voice shaking but clear. We're here to discuss the $150,000 reserve fund you've already stolen. Harris's smile vanished. Aliner's face went white. Now, Mark yelled. The Garcias and 3 other families moved fast, passing the packets down every row. This is slander, Aliner shrieked into the mic. You're out of order. You're out of time, Aliner, Mark said, walking down the aisle holding his own copy. Page 1, the incorporation of Vance Holdings. Page 2. The bank statement transferring $150,000 of our money to your company. Page 3. The consulting fee you received from Crestview Homes. It's all here. You closed the pool to line your pockets, and now you're trying to rob us one last time. A woman in the front row screamed. She's a thief. Aliner grabbed her gavel, banging it uselessly. This meeting is adjourned. This is an illegal. It's not illegal, Mark said, finally reaching the podium. He pulled his phone from his pocket and held it up, showing the red recording light. But what you did is, and we have it all, every fine, every threat, every lie you just told about that pump, we've recorded it all. Aliner looked from Mark's phone to the sea of enraged faces reading the evidence. She looked to the back to Mr. Harris. The developer wasn't there. The door was swinging shut. He had already run. She was alone. The clubhouse, which moments before had been a cacophony of outrage, fell into a stunning, electric silence. The only sound was the rustling of 50 people turning to page 4, the property records showing the coordinated sales to the Crestview LLC. Aliner Vance stood trapped between the podium and the pull-down projector screen, her face a mask of disbelief. Her power, so absolute for so long, had evaporated in less than 60 seconds. The gavel was limp in her hand. This is a misunderstanding, she stammered, the microphone amplifying her sudden weakness. Vance Holdings is a registered vendor. These are complex transactions. Then you won't mind explaining them, Mark said. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Let's start with the $4,250 in fines you levied against my dead sister. Was that a complex transaction? A gasp went through the room. Or the $2,000 for Ben Miller's roses, Mark continued, stepping to the side so the crowd could see her. The $1,500 for the Garcia's shutters. Where did that money go, Aliner? It didn't go to fix the sidewalks, it didn't go to mow the common areas, and it damn sure didn't go to fix the pool. This is slander. You have no proof, she shrieked, finding a last vestige of her old authority. It's not slander when it's true, Maria Garcia cried out, standing on her chair. She was weeping, but her voice was strong. She threatened us. She said if we didn't sell, she'd find a way, and the debt always wins. She's a monster. She's a criminal, someone yelled from the back. Ben Miller had moved quietly to the main entrance. He'd been on the phone. The police are on their way, Aliner. So is a reporter from the city paper. You can explain the complex transactions to them. At the word police, Aliner finally broke. The mask of the HOA president shattered, revealing the terrified, cornered con artist underneath. She made a dash for the side door, pushing past a bewildered homeowner. But Ben had anticipated it. 2 of the other men who had been fined, big guys, a former plumber and a mailman, were blocking the exit. This is assault, she screamed, clawing at the plumber's arm. You can't keep me here. We're not, the plumber said, not flinching. We're just residents discussing a community matter. You're the one who always said participation was mandatory. Mark stepped up to the microphone she had abandoned. His hands were shaking so hard he had to grip the sides of the podium. For almost a year, he said, his voice filling the room, this woman has terrorized us. She used our own rules against us. She preyed on the sick, on the elderly, on anyone she thought was too weak or too scared to fight back. She did it to enrich herself, and she did it to help a predatory developer steal our homes from under us. He looked at the sea of faces, his neighbors. They were pale, furious, but they were together. She did it to my sister, Sarah. She harassed her while she was dying. She tried to bully her into selling. His voice cracked, but he pushed on. This was Sarah's house. This is my house. And you, he said, pointing a shaking finger directly at Aliner, who had shrunk against the wall, you are not taking it. The wail of a siren cut through the night. Red and blue lights flashed through the high clubhouse windows, painting the room in strobes of judgment. 2 uniformed officers entered, and the crowd parted like the Red Sea. "What's going on here?" the first officer asked, his hand on his hip. "That's her," Ben said, pointing. "Eleanor Vance. We have evidence of embezzlement, wire fraud, and extortion." "That is a lie," Eleanor screamed. "I am the president of this association. This is my meeting. These people are trespassing there. They're unhinged. This man," she pointed at Mark, "is a delinquent. He owes this association thousands of dollars." "Is that so?" the second officer said, looking at Mark. Mark just held up his phone. "It's all here, officer, her confession, her threats, and about those thousands of dollars." He walked over to the table and picked up the binder. "Here's the evidence of her fraud. Bank statements, LLC registrations, invoices from her own shell company. She's been bleeding this community dry." The officer took the binder. He flipped through the first few pages. His eyebrows shot up. He looked at his partner. This was no simple civil dispute. "Ma'am," the first officer said, his voice flat and official, "we need you to come with us." "You can't," she shrieked, backing away. "This is private property. I am the victim here." "You can explain that downtown." As the officer took her arm, she went rigid. All the fight, all the venom, all the righteous, petty tyranny coalesced into one last, desperate act of defiance. She looked at Mark. Her eyes were black with a hatred so pure it was almost visible. "You," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "You couldn't even wash your car. You're just like her. Weak. You'll never belong here." Mark didn't flinch. He thought of the $500 fine. He thought of the absurd, nonsensical accusation that had started it all. He thought of his sister. He just looked at her, his expression unreadable. "It wasn't a public pool violation, Eleanor," he said, his voice quiet but carrying in the dead silence. "It was just soap, and you're all washed up." The room erupted. It wasn't cheers. It was a raw, cathartic roar of relief, of justice, of a nightmare finally ending. As the officers cuffed her and read her rights, Eleanor Vance, the queen of the cul-de-sac, looked small. She looked pathetic. And as they walked her past Mark, he saw it. The ultimate delicious irony. She had been so obsessed with his unauthorized water accumulation that she'd never noticed her own. Her mascara was running. Thick, black, soapy-looking streaks were cutting lines down her pale cheeks. She was the one with the runoff, after all. The aftermath was a hurricane. The city paper ran the story on the front page. HOA president accused of racketeering, queen of the cul-de-sac, DETHRONED. The district attorney's office, handed a case in a box by Mark and his neighbors, moved with shocking speed. They froze the accounts of Vance Holdings and the Crestview LLC. They discovered the fraud was even deeper than Mark had realized, totaling over $500,000 in siphoned funds, falsified invoices, and illegal kickbacks from vendors over 3 years. Mr. Harris, the developer, was apprehended 2 days later trying to board a flight to the Cayman Islands. He and his partners at Crestview Homes were indicted on charges of conspiracy, bribery of a corporate officer, and predatory real estate practices. Their Oakwood Creek project was dead. The 12 homes they had acquired were frozen, assets to be dealt with in the coming class action lawsuit. The HOA was thrown into immediate receivership. The state dissolved Eleanor's puppet board and appointed a neutral third-party trustee to manage the community's finances, while a new, real election was organized. Ben Miller was unanimously elected the new president. The Garcias took charge of the Architectural Review Committee, their first act being to publicly burn the approved beige paint swatches at the next community barbecue. All of Eleanor's fines, Mark's, Sarah's, the Garcias, everyone's, were voided. The $4,250 balance on Mark's account vanished, replaced by a formal, written apology from the new board. The liens were lifted. The threats were over. Mark's house was quiet. The binders were gone from his living room. The angry neighbors no longer congregated in his kitchen. It was just a house again, his sister's house. He found himself wandering the halls, the silence ringing in his ears. He had won. He had gotten justice for Sarah, but he didn't feel victorious. He just felt empty. The fight had given him a purpose, a place to channel his grief and rage. Now there was nothing left to fight. He found himself back in the garage, staring at the midnight blue sedan. It was still covered in a film of dried soap and dust. He hadn't touched it since the day it all began. He picked up the buffer. He plugged it in. The high-pitched whine filled the air. He started on the hood, working in slow, careful circles, bringing the paint to a deep, perfect shine. He worked for hours. He washed the windows. He vacuumed the interior. He armor-alled the tires. He didn't use the hose, just a bucket and sponge, carefully, methodically. When he was done, the car looked new. It looked the way it did when Sarah had first bought it, the day she'd driven him to the beach, the windows down, the radio blaring. He sat in the driver's seat and found her old emergency pack of gum in the glove compartment. He put a piece in his mouth. It was stale, but it was hers, and for the first time in months he didn't cry, he just sat. 6 months later, spring arrived. The snow melted and the grass turned a vibrant, defiant green. The Crestview lawsuit had settled. The developer, facing criminal charges, had agreed to sell the 12 homes back to the HOA at a massive loss, funded by the damages they'd paid. The new board, led by Ben, sold them, at fair market value, to new families. The neighborhood was whole again. With the recovered funds from the lawsuit and the newly solvent HOA budget, the board's first priority was clear. Mark got an invitation on his door, a bright yellow flyer. OAKWOOD Creek Grand reopening, the pool is back. He walked down the street that Saturday. The gate, once chained and foreboding, was wide open. The sound of children laughing and splashing echoed down the block. The clubhouse, once a courtroom, was now filled with food and music. Ben waved him over, handing him a beer. "Looks good, doesn't it?" Mark looked at the pool. The water was crystal clear, a perfect, shimmering blue. The plaster was patched. New lounge chairs lined the deck. "It's perfect, Ben." "The new pump is quiet," Ben said, sipping his drink. "No catastrophic failure after all. Funny how that works." He saw Maria Garcia, not in her usual drab beige, but in a bright red sundress, teaching her grandchild how to float. He saw the mailman who had blocked the door, doing a cannonball, his kids cheering him on. He found a chair in the sun, tilted his head back, and closed his eyes. He heard the splash of water, the sizzle of the grill, the murmur of happy, friendly conversation. This was what Sarah had wanted. This was the community she'd told him about. He must have dozed off because he was startled awake by a splash of cold water hitting his face. He sputtered, opening his eyes. A group of kids had cannonballed nearby. "Sorry, mister," one of them yelled. Mark wiped the water from his face. A small puddle was forming at his feet on the hot concrete. Ben laughed, handing him a napkin. "Watch out, Mark, that's an unauthorized water accumulation." Mark looked at the puddle by his chair. "That's right," Ben added, his eyes twinkling. "That's a recreational hazard, better cure it." A slow smile spread across Mark's face. He looked at the laughing kids, at the blue water, at the bright sun. He raised his bottle to the sky. "To the public pool," he said. He was finally cured.